Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 551. I am so excited for today's guest. We have with us Chris Burres from myvitalc.com. You can go to myvitalc.com/LTH because Chris is giving us a great discount. Thank you so much for doing that, Chris. People are like, discount for what? What are you talking about? I'm really excited to jump into today's interview because for years I've wanted to do an episode on this topic. And so I finally found the right expert. I was waiting to find one. And so Chris, you are the expert I've been waiting for. So thank you for coming on the show and teaching us about C60, and not just C60, because there's so much, I don't want to say controversy, but there's, buyer beware, right? And you discovered a specific type that is the purest and best type. So I'm very excited to jump into this discussion today. Welcome to the show.
Ashley, thank you so much for having me. It's very cool. A lot of people that I connect with have never even heard of C60. And when they share with me that they have heard of C60, the thing I like to share is how proud I am because me and my business partner are the oldest and longest manufacturer and distributor of C60 or carbon 60 on the planet. So we've been manufacturing it since 1991. So when you say you found the right guy to interview, I humbly agree with you.
My gosh, 1991. Okay. I learned about it 7 years ago and I thought I was like an early adopter.
Yeah.
Boy, was I wrong.
Yep, 1991, 34 years now?
Very cool. So how I learned about it was through Cliff High. And I think there's a lot of people I think that listen to Cliff High that learned about it. I don't listen to him all the time. I just think sometimes he's interesting. Sometimes I disagree with him. Sometimes he's really spot on. But he discovered C60 and he told some really interesting stories of the discovery of it, and that he knew a few people who used it in conjunction with all the holistic things they were doing to no longer have cancer in their body. So he decided to also utilize it, and he's here 7 years later. So I think there's something to say about that. But he knows several people who also have lived longer, overcoming a very
yes, there's a dance we have to do.
Diseases that could potentially have been fatal, and whether or not that was the C60. I mean, you get enough people who say, I was diagnosed with terminal cancer and I decided to do this, and this, and they all have something in common, like C60, and they are all still here. Our ears perk up when we go, that's interesting. I wonder why. So I definitely want to get into the studies, the science, and also the story of discovery of how they discovered C60, because I think it's fascinating. And since you are the expert, I'll hand over the mic to you.
Excellent. So, and I've written a book called Live Longer and Better, which is the story of C60, kind of its discovery, its evolution into the health space, and really some of my learnings as I've jumped in as a longevity expert. The molecule was discovered in 1985 at Rice University here in Houston, Texas. That's where our lab is based. The guys who discovered the molecule, the three scientists, won the Nobel Prize for that discovery in 1996. So they discovered it in 85, published a paper in Nature magazine, one of the most, or if not the most prestigious scientific publications on the planet, and then in 1996 won the Nobel Prize for that discovery. As we've kind of already touched on, my business partner and I started manufacturing it in 1991, a full 5 years before they won the Nobel Prize. So we've been, this front row seat of watching this molecule become a Nobel Prize winning molecule, get into some amazing industrial applications, and then into the health space. And I'm not a very braggadocious person, but I'm comfortable with this appropriate dance saying we were delivering commercial quantities of carbon nanomaterials of this specific carbon material for 5 years before they won the Nobel Prize. It's not unreasonable to think that because we were delivering these quantities of carbon 60 to researchers, they could actually do scientific studies with him, and they could understand how amazing the molecule is. And that is part of the reason that those three scientists, Dr. Smalley, Dr. Curl, and Dr. Kroto, actually won the Nobel Prize. So I'm extremely proud in this space. And what is the molecule? The molecule, the best way to picture it, right? There's a book called The Most Beautiful Molecule, which is entirely about one molecule. I'm not sure many molecules have entire books written about them, and especially with the title, The Most Beautiful Molecule. The best way to picture it is if you imagine a soccer ball, the classic soccer ball, and imagine that the lines on the soccer ball represent the bonds between the carbon atoms. So you have a spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms in the shape of a soccer ball. The molecule is absolutely amazing. I describe it as performing as well or better than the current best material in almost every application. So it makes better inks, better batteries, better tires, better photocells. And often this is where people get a little nervous, right? We're on the Learn True Health podcast, and health and batteries, tires, photocells typically don't interact. In fact, I mean, you probably have biohackers listening, but this is probably true. No one in your audience woke up this morning, looked at their car, and thought about what part of their car battery they should be taking on a daily basis for their health, right? Again, you have some biohackers, so there might be one or two. And so it's an industrial molecule. This is kind of nerve-wracking when you say inks, batteries, tires, and photocells. But the story gets a little bit worse first, right? So on the exterior, yeah, it's not bad enough yet. We can make it worse. On the exterior of the soccer ball molecule, there is a shape that is the same shape as benzene, and it's also almost the same chemical formula as benzene. It's the 6 carbons. Benzene has hydrogens on the ends of each carbon, so it's 6 carbons and 6 hydrogens. Now, benzene is ubiquitous in our society. We do not have modern society without the benzene ring. To kind of have this as evidence, look around you in this moment and notice everything that is plastic and imagine it gone, because the foundational molecule is the benzene ring. Many medications have benzene as the foundational molecule, including aspirin, many detergents. So we don't have modern society without the benzene ring. And it is absolutely ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Now, there is something about benzene that's not so good, which is when it's all by itself, it is known to be toxic and known to be a carcinogen. So you look at this soccer ball-shaped molecule, it's got 20 of these kind of almost equivalent to benzene rings on the exterior. So the scientists just assumed that this molecule would be toxic. And they put it in a toxicity study. In that study, they gave Wistar rats, that was the test subjects. Well, really, there were 3 groups. One of them was given water, that's the control group. The next group was given olive oil, kind of a semi-control group. And the last group was given olive oil. And now I'll start to make a distinction, and we'll explain it here in a second. But when we start thinking about consuming this for people and pets, I start to call it C60, which stands for elemental safe spheres. So, right, we got the spheres, they're safe, the element is carbon, and there's 60 of them. So the final group, they gave the olive oil with ESS60 in it. Instead of being toxic, the test subjects that they gave the olive oil with ESS60 in it lived 90% longer than the control group. So that's the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals. It's peer-reviewed published research, and I'm, again, super proud to share that our lab provided the material, and our lab is actually mentioned in that original study. So that,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
That's
so that's
so
kind of
cool.
the long and short. I know there's so much that we can dive into given that piece.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. Did they first create this molecule in thinking that they could make a lubricant?
So interestingly, as so many amazing scientific discoveries, right? Like this is Nobel Prize winning at the end of the day. It was discovered kind of serendipitously. So the story looks like this, and it has so many stories, right? Like you get into science, and I studied engineering. I've been a scientist as far back as I can remember, and I've always had this kind of feeling that science is black or white, right? Like it just happens, and it happens because of hard effort, and I never really thought about luck and creativity going into science. And that was just my limited understanding of how much luck and how much creativity actually goes into it. So Dr. Harold Kroto, who actually got knighted, so at some point in his life, he's passed now. Sir Harold Kroto is an astrophysicist out of the UK, and he's looking into space, and he sees a spectrum that he can't identify, right? Like, and I kind of think there's a little magic involved in like just looking at some wavelength that's coming from space and identifying what the molecules that created that wavelength. I think that's amazing. But he sees this one spectrum and he doesn't know what it is. He suspects that it's carbon. Here at Rice University in Houston, Dr. Richard Smalley has a piece of equipment that's pretty fantastic, right? So this piece of equipment, you take a sample, you shine a laser at the sample, and it vaporizes that sample. And then a puff of inert gas will take that vapor into a mass spectrometer, and then it'll tell you the exact makeup of the molecules that were in that vapor, right? So Harold Kroto thinks that this might be really kind of reminiscent of what's going on in space, right? It's in a vacuum. There's no oxygen. There's very little gases at all, except for this puff of inert gas that's taking it into the mass spectrometer. And Harold Kroto thinks, hey, we could probably use this piece of equipment to recreate whatever this molecule is that's out in space that's creating this spectrum. So he comes to visit Richard Smalley at Rice University. And he's like, hey, I'd love to throw carbon in this machine. And the first trip, Richard Smalley rebukes him. He says, listen, carbon's boring. Carbon's everywhere. It's super boring. I'm doing sexy things like titanium and exotic alloys. There's no way I'm going to throw boring carbon in my piece of equipment. So Harold Kroto goes back to the UK. He gets another trip over here to Houston and visits Richard Smalley and asks, hey, can we throw carbon in? And again, Richard Smalley's like, I've moved on to different alloys, but they're still so much sexier than carbon. We're not putting this in my fancy machine. Carbon's just so boring. So he goes back to the UK. Finally, on the third trip, he comes back. He asks Richard Smalley, and this is the nice twist in the story. Richard Smalley again says no. But one of Richard Smalley's grad students actually pulls Dr. Kroto aside and says, listen, I'm going to come in over the weekend. I'll throw your boring old carbon in and we'll see what comes up, right? And I'm not sure that the grad student was really expecting much. But he was able to put carbon in here. And as you think about this carbon vapor going into the mass spectrometer, it's ostensibly making sheets of graphene, right? Individual sheets of graphene. And for whatever reason on the mass spectrometer, there's a little peak at 60 and there's a little peak at 70. And if you're a scientist who's kind of familiar with this situation, you would ask yourself, why would I have a flat sheet of carbon, a predominance of them at 60 versus 59 or 61, right? There's kind of, if it's just a flat sheet, there's no energy value in having 60 over 59 or 61. He's actually able to tweak the equipment, increase the peaks on the 60 and the 70. And so he brings this data to the team on Monday. By the way, kind of fun side note, IBM had the exact same data 1 year prior. They wrote it off as an anomaly. So like this is the difference. This is the creativity. This is like looking at it with an open mind kind of situation that science really is ultimately. So they're trying to figure out this 60. Why would 60 happen? They're doing all sorts of things. They're trying to figure it out. And actually in the Houston Chronicle, we still have an article that talks about, Richard Smalley finally putting all of these pieces together. And it's, the soccer ball shaped thing. And it's the eureka moment where the ball drops and it's bouncing in this kind of, amazing discovery. And then they kind of quickly push it to publish it. And so that's the actual discovery. The grad student who came in on that weekend, his name's Heath, he doesn't have a Nobel Prize. It's Smalley, Curl, and Kroto that have the Nobel Prize. But what an interesting story in, kind of, again, serendipity, which happens in so many scientific discoveries.
So after discovering it, who goes, okay, what can we do with this? Like, how can we apply this?
Yeah.
Does someone kind of take that torch up and start going like, where can this exist? Can it be in the industry? Like, 'cause like I heard the story about them trying to make a better lubricant.
Yeah. So the very next thing, one, they're trying to figure out how can we make macroscopic quantities, right? Because you can think about the puff of gas that's coming off of a laser vaporization is not enough material to work with. And so there's a number of years, about 5 years, where they don't know how to manufacture this in bulk. And it's Huffman and Kratchmer who actually put together the way to vaporize to. So here's one of the reasons, and the material is still expensive today, and this is why. The best way to manufacture it at this point is you take 2 graphite rods and you vaporize them, right? So you put a temperature between those graphite rods that is the same as the sun in order to vaporize graphite. And it has to be the same as the sun because graphite is one of the hardest materials on the planet to vaporize. Not only does it have to be at the temperature of the sun, it also has to be at a reduced atmosphere, so a slight vacuum, and devoid of oxygen. Any oxygen will kill the reaction. And so Huffman and Kratchmer are the first to kind of do this in a chamber, play around with the variables, realize that you can't have any oxygen. I think that was pretty early on, but also realize that you get the highest concentration of a collection of molecules called fullerenes. So let me talk about that for a second. So this soccer ball shaped molecule is discovered, and it's also discovered with 70, which is a little bit more rugby shaped. And it turns out there's a whole collection of molecules, carbon 60, carbon 70, carbon 76, carbon 84 on up. And they just get bigger, and it's all in multiples of 2, but not every even number works because you're dealing with the, kind of the shapes on the panels on the exterior of that soccer ball as a model. And those they decide to call fullerenes. And the reason they decided to call them fullerenes is after a guy named Buckminster Fuller. He is a futurist and the guy who brought to prominence the geodesic dome. Now, the geodesic dome is in fact the same shape as this soccer ball. We would be familiar, if you've ever been to Epcot Center, you've got that dome. That Epcot dome is a geodesic dome. I always kind of picture when I'm at the beach, every now and then you see these geodesic domes. Dr. Buckminster Fuller brought that particular shape to prominence. He didn't invent it, but he brought it to prominence. And in part of the story, Richard Smalley and Robert Curl at one point were at I think it was the Toronto World Fair, and they actually had a geodesic dome as a big giant geodesic dome there. And so kind of in homage to Buckminster Fuller, they call this collection of molecules fullerenes, and then carbon 60 is affectionately known as the buckyball, right? Because it's ball-shaped and Buckminster Fuller. So
like a soccer ball.
Yeah. So they so now we're trying to make macroscopic quantities. In the interim, there actually, there's a lot of calculations on chemistry that are very accurate. Now, you need to be very careful. You can go read a paper that says this molecule is going to do XYZ, and that's not always the case. But you can have inklings of what's going to happen. So even back before they were making macroscopic quantities of this material, they understood that it could probably hold up to 6 negatively charged particles on the exterior of the cage. They knew that it would have great strength. In fact, it's got 6-fold symmetry. There's 6 planes through which this molecule has symmetry, which gives it incredible strength. In fact, you can fire it at 15,000 miles per hour at a plate of steel. Most molecules will just shred apart. The ES as well, the C60 molecule will I kind of picture it like a ball kind of compressing and then bouncing right back. So it's incredibly resilient. They knew that if they could get their hands on macroscopic quantities, it would be amazing. And as I mentioned, once they did, it performs as well or better than the current best material, better in inks, batteries, tires, and photocells. Now, from a lubricant perspective, your mind immediately goes to a ball bearing, right? Like, hey, I've got this little tiny ball, right? It's, 10 nanometers across. It's just hard to imagine how small this is. And so if I've got a bunch of balls, then I should be able to use them like ball bearings. One of the problems actually doesn't turn out to work that well is because when you zoom into the most mirrored surface that you've ever seen, there are cracks in that surface, right? There's deep crevasses, and we could even say like Grand Canyon size things compared to when you zoom in enough. And these little buckyballs sit way down at the bottom. It's kind of like, I don't know, dropping one geodesic dome into the Grand Canyon and thinking that's going to help from some sort of lubrication perspective, right? So it actually doesn't work that well there. There are other kind of fullerenic materials that do well for lubrication, but yeah, that particular one hasn't panned out.
So the story that I heard, and please fill in the gaps or correct me where I'm wrong, is that they fed C60 to mice or rats in order to see what the toxicity was, so they could use it in industry, right? Because before you would use it in industry, they would need to know, like, is this harmful to humans? Like, does it immediately kill animals? And instead of it killing the animals, they ended up living, and they know how long, like, lab rats live, like, let's say a year or something. Like, they just know this. They ended up living many years longer, and also then wasn't there a scientist who had like rats with or mice with cancer, and then gave it to them and saw some really interesting results?
Yeah, so there's pieces of what you're saying that are actually all tied together into the same study. So they did, because of this kind of benzene shape on the exterior of the cage, thought it would be toxic. They also, because it makes great inks, batteries, tires, and photocells, thought that man would be working with it on a regular basis. And so you need to understand the toxicity level. Like, how protected do we need to be if we're working on it? Do I need a Tyvek suit? Does it need to be a clean room? Can I just like pick up gobs of it in my hand and throw it into, some paint? Or, what does that look like in order to be safe? So yeah, they did this study. Now, it was on Wistar rats. And Wistar rats are a unique, kind of readily researched rat. And I'll talk about kind of a cancer implication there, but that's all part of the same study. Something to note is when you're going into a toxicity study, you don't like just give a little bit to the rats and see if they feel unwell, right? Your goal is to understand, is there a toxic level? So they really gave these rats almost as much oil as they could have, right, olive oil, with as much of the ESS60 molecule as they could get to dissolve into the olive oil. And they didn't die. All of the control rats. So remember, one group was given water. That's the control group. All of them were dead at about 32 months. That's the typical lifespan of a Wistar rat. With the olive oil rats, they lived 30% longer. So one takeaway from this study, and certainly Dr. Stephen Gundry and Brian Johnson are, heavily promoting olive oil. I would second that, and this study certainly supports that. There was a 30% extension of life in these Wistar rats, and then with the ESS60 rats, a full 90% extension. What a Wistar rat's life looks like, kind of related to cancer, is a typical Wistar rat lives out to 32 months and has a known amount of tumor mass in its body. So the longer it lives, the more tumor mass it has in its body. Even though the ESS60 rats lived out to 62 months, ostensibly they should have had twice as much tumor mass in their body. None of them had any tumors, right? And this is a pretty profound result. And I've told that story, and a lot of people will say, "Oh my God, it can't, cure for cancer." And my response is no. And then I follow that with another no. Right? Like hold your horses. There is a huge difference between dealing with a cancer that has metastasized and actually being a cancer preventative, right? And we know things as simple as, good nutrition, good sleep, good exercise can be cancer preventatives. That piece of the story does suggest that, we've got good cancer prevention aspects of this molecule. And I'll share a couple of things. There are patents related to the molecule as cancer treatments for pets. Like now a patent doesn't mean it works. It just means somebody's decided to patent it, right? And there is one other study that I think is pretty profound. it's a petri dish study. So this is kind of the lowest level of study, right? To get from a petri dish into an animal model is almost night and day, but this is pretty profound. So you take a petri dish of healthy cells and cancer cells, and you introduce an anti-cancer agent. Now, that is a poison. You're hoping to poison the cancer cells before you poison the healthy cells. If you do that in the presence of the ESS60 molecule, there is increased efficacy against the cancer cells and protective effects for the healthy cells. So more cancer cells die and less healthy cells die in the presence of ESS60. So the reality is this is going to be something that's going to be researched a lot more as time goes on.
The concern that I think old school oncologists have is that if you're taking a supplement to support your health, like a antioxidant supplement, that you're nullifying nullifying chemo and radiation, because that would support the cancer, right? And we don't want to do anything to support the cancer. I've even heard oncologists say, don't even eat fruit, like don't even eat healthy food. And it's so ludicrous to think that we shouldn't be trying to keep the healthy cells alive while helping the body beat the unhealthy cells or remove the unhealthy cells. So I love that petri dish study, so showing that it could be protective of the healthy cells, but it doesn't necessarily protect the cells we want to remove. And going back to that rat study, so there's 3 groups, just to clarify, 3 groups. One had water, one had just regular olive oil, and one had olive oil mixed with as high concentration of the carbon 60 mixed in. And those rats lived an incredibly long life. But didn't the scientists kind of like go, okay, this is enough, and ended up like killing the rats himself? Like he didn't wait for them to die naturally, right?
Well, he waited for all of them. And by the way, this is the perfect opportunity to get, and I'm excited to share, we've actually published with the lead researcher of that study. So not only are we mentioned, is our lab mentioned in the study, and our lab provided the material, but we've actually continued on to do research with him, Dr. Fathi Musa. And I love to give credit to them, because if anything was ever true, when all of the control group in a toxicity study are dead and all of the quote unquote toxic rats are still alive, it's not toxic, right? Like if anything is ever true, that's a fact. Like all normal rats are dead, all quote unquote rats given a toxic material are still alive. We can be pretty assured that it's not toxic. But kudos to them, because they continued to do another, in this case, 30 months of animal husbandry to keep these rats alive and get this amazing result. So that's absolutely amazing. Now, they only euthanized one. So they're doing the animal husbandry. All of the rats are finally dead except for the last one, right? So the last 2 rats in the ESS60 group, one of them dies, and they're like, okay, it's time to publish. So they, humanely euthanize the final rat. Put together the research and published this in mid 2012. So he didn't kill them all; he just killed one of them.
Oh, okay. And interesting it would be interesting to know how long could that rat have lived. They lived, would you say, 90% longer than their known lifespan?
Yes.
It's wild.
It's crazy.
It's wild.
When you say,
isn't that cool?
The single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, and it's peer-reviewed published research, your ears, I mean, it's a mouthful, but your ears perk up. You're like, that really? The next best way to live longer that's got research is calorie restriction. If you reduce your calorie consumption by 30%, you can extend your life by 30%. And this is done in multiple animal models, so this is basically rock solid. I call that the starve yourself 1/3 to death diet. Nobody signs up for that diet. I don't know. maybe they need a marketing team to relabel the starve yourself 1/3 to death diet. But that's the next best way to live longer.
Tell us about other studies that have come out since then, or other, clinical findings as you've progressed? Like you said, you've been doing this for 34 years.
So there are the supplement industry is challenged, and at some point I'd like to get into like our journey, right? Because my business partner and I legitimately tried not to get into the supplement industry for more than 4 years, but the industry is challenged, and one thing that seems to be true of supplement companies is they tend not to do research, and when they do research, they tend not to publish that research. We are actually doing research. We are actually publishing research. About 2 months ago, we cut a $150,000 check for even more research as we're kind of trying to advance this molecule, I think, into the position that it really deserves to be in. So when you start thinking about human trials, we have lots of customers, and the product is safe and it's on the market according to kind of the legal process. But there aren't many human trials. And I would say one of the very few is just an ad hoc study that we have done, and to share kind of that process. Before the pandemic, I was in contact with a Benjamin Smaller. He's out of the University of California, San Diego. And he happened to be an Oura Ring consultant, right? So Oura Ring, one of the better sleep trackers on the market. And our most consistent testimonial is people take the product in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. And because sleep, and so really, as I'm trying to figure out what's going on as the chief scientist of a new supplement company, right? At one point, I'm the chief scientist of a carbon nanomaterial company. Great, ironically, that's much easier than being the chief scientist of a supplement company. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, and right, why we might be getting these benefits, why these rats might have lived longer in the first place. We really did land was on sleep. If you can improve your sleep, you can improve your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. And so because of that, I was looking for this opportunity to start some sort of research. Connected with Benjamin Smaller, we started this study where we were just really ad hoc, right? Like, so let's see if we can get people together. They'll ended up being a crossover study. And then pandemic hit, and it turns out the Oura Ring is actually pretty good at identifying COVID. And so you can imagine he disappeared, and I've really kind of lost touch with him. But we continued with this study, and here's what that study looks like. It's crossover. So for 10 days prior to the participants taking the product, they answered 4 survey questions. How good was your sleep? How restless was your sleep? How quickly did you fall asleep? And how did you feel the next morning? So super simple. We collected 10 days of data before they tried the product, 10 days of data while they were on the product, 10 days of data while they were off the product, and then 10 days of data back on the product.
And when you say data, do you mean the Oura Ring data as well, or just them self-reporting?
Just self-reporting. And we've actually gotten a lot more sophisticated and are working to get more people through it. There's, this is a new space for me. So I was like, I did not realize there were standardized questionnaires that you can use that the Institute of Health recognizes as a good source of information about people's sleep. Oh, cool. So we're working on those studies now.
Nice.
And in this particular study, 100%, and it's only 10, right? We only got 10 people through this so far. 100% of those 10 people reported improvements when they were on the product. And we're in the middle of doing what I call an ad hoc, and we'll be taking this one to a clinical trial, I'm pretty sure, what's called an ad hoc HSCRP. Ad hoc just meaning, like, again, what kind of people can we recruit? We're looking for, we've got a kind of a network of practitioners. They may have people who have elevated HSCRP, and we're working to get them into the study. Now, the story behind that is pretty fascinating. So we had a booth at A4M, so that's the Anti-Aging Academy, American Anti-Aging Academy, and they have an event called Longevity Fest, and it's in Vegas. And this Dr. Lane Young came up to me, and he said this, and as soon as he said it, I said, you have to say it again, let me record it. So I actually have a recording of it. And I had a conversation with him back at the biohacking conversation, and he walked up and he said, Chris, I don't care if you're male, female, pre-surgery, post-surgery, cardiovascular disease, otherwise healthy. if you have elevated HSCRP, and I'll talk about that in a second, your product brings it down into normal ranges in 4 to 8 weeks. And his particular situation, he was talking about a client that he wasn't actually, with his protocols, able to move the dial on, who was at 9 and brought him down to 0.9. Anything under 1 is considered normal in 4 to 8 weeks. Now, HSCRP stands for high sensitivity C-reactive protein, and it is an inflammatory marker. Now, the FDA is very particular about how you speak about chronic inflammation, and I'm sure I'll jump into that at some point. But we can talk about positive impacts on inflammatory markers. And so that has kind of launched us into, hey, practitioners in our network, if you have somebody who's got an elevated HSCRP and it's not really, and you're not able to move the needle on it, then let us know and we'll get them involved in this study. Now, I do want to share because
that's going to be so cool.
Yeah.
Please come back on the show after you've published that.
Yes. No, like we're honestly, it's so exciting. It's expensive, right? But it's so exciting to be doing the hard work and really the hard work that a lot of supplement companies don't do.
As very exciting. So I just want to stop here and say, I have purchased C60 because I didn't know like where to get it from, right?
Until now.
Amazon. Yeah, until now. No, seriously. Because, and I looked into it and it was like, Chris Hyde would talk about it and he's like, there are guys making it like in their garage, like they turn their garage into a laboratory. And it's like, can we trust the quality? And this is the thing with the supplement industry. It is buyer beware. And we don't want it to be a regulated industry because then big pharma takes over and then we lose so many great supplements if that were to happen. So we don't want regulation, but we do have to then as a consumer, we have to question everything, do our own research, go around and really look into and investigate different companies. And then even when you trust one company, you have to kind of keep an eye on them because sometimes they get bought out by another company and then the quality goes down. And I've seen it happen before in the supplement industry. So I have taken C60. I've taken it from, I bought it from people. I was like, I don't know. This is kind of like, this seems shady. Almost
it's like
a street drug deal, right? Like, did you make this in your basement? Like, and I haven't bought, I'm going to admit, I have never tried your C60, but the C60s I have tried, I can't wait to try yours to compare. There's been some where I didn't feel anything and I'm like, that was probably, fake C60, right? Because like people have been, they sell it on Amazon or eBay. You just, maybe it's just fake, they put a bit of like some black powder, like charcoal in olive oil and sold it to me like it's C60. Like, who knows?
Well, okay, let me jump in here because you said so many things that are are valuable to touch on. One, I agree with you with the I want the FDA involved to some degree. I'll never forget, right? So as I've got my new hat, right? I'm now the chief scientist of a supplement company. So I got to figure out like what hoops do we have to jump through? Like how do we do this responsibly? And right. I'll never forget when I was on the FDA website and I found a statement and I literally took a screenshot because I thought there's no way this is going to stay up here. Like this must be some sort of error. I want a screenshot of it. And it said that the FDA does not require you to prove that a supplement is safe before you bring it to the market.
Yep.
And I thought this can't be right. Like, and I have to imagine that a lot of your listeners are like, that doesn't make sense. I thought the FDA was keeping an eye on these things.
Nope.
But their role is different, right? So one, in order to even follow the nutritional supplement guideline, there are some restrictions. And if you think about what the Herculean task of proving that supplements are safe before you bring them to the market, like there's just no way to have an organization that big. And let me give you an example. So Ashley, We could be kind of competitive formulators, and you could put together a 10% vitamin D and a 90% vitamin E, and I could do the reverse. These are in fact two different supplements, right? And there's an infinite number of these combinations, and there is no budget, there is no task force big enough to be able to kind of approve all of these before they go to the market. And I'm with you. I want access to these things, even other than mine, because I want to optimize things as soon as I can, as soon as we have some sense that they're good and safe. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I tend to agree with you and agree in general. You mentioned a black powder. This is part of the reason we created ESS60, is because there's actually 4 C60 products that I would not consume. One of them I've actually done videos about, and I am a big believer that negative marketing is bad for the industry, so I try very hard not to do it. This particular video, he doesn't have C60 in the product. And so I was more comfortable doing the video, because even though he claims to be in the C60 space, he is in fact not in the C60 space. And so I happily put that product, put a video out, and that's out there. Another one is actually Global Healing, is a company that's based here in Houston. I think he has I can't remember his name, but I think he's got a big following. He sells a product, and the whole literature on the page for this supercharged C60 is about all the benefits that have been recognized in the scientific literature about C60. And then at the very bottom, what he admits he's selling is what are called nano onions. Now, nano onions, if you think,
Onions?
yeah, so if you think about a C60 ball, right, and then you can think about a slightly bigger ball encompassing it, right? So you got this onion, these layers, and then you chop it in half, right? These are nano onions. They are not C60. And in fact, if you have any C60 in there, it's lucky, because you had 120, a ball that was 120, and you cut it in half, and so half of it is C60, but it is in fact not the shape of C60. So to get in there and describe all the benefits of C60 and then sell something that is not, also, and more concerning, there is absolutely zero toxicity data on nano onions. These have never been consumed in any sort of rat study, in any sort of other study. This should not be on the market. And I can share with you a good friend of ours who actually was a grad student of Dr. Smalley's, so here in Houston at Rice. He takes nano onions and puts them in oil because they improve oil, but there's no toxicity data. So that's 2. There's one other group. This is just so frustrating. So, the little Listerine strips that you can use to freshen your breath?
Yeah.
You know how small they are and they melt, right? There's a company that sells a C60 product that is a Listerine strip, which doesn't sound that crazy until you understand the industry looks at a proper serving as being 1 teaspoon, which is the same as 5 mils. How many Listerine strips does it take to make a teaspoon?
Oh my goodness.
I think the whole package would be fair. So they're taking this C60 and having the experience you described, which is, and this is my frustration, people are going to order these C60 Listerine strips. They're going to try them, and they're going to go and they're going to tell their friends, I tried that C60 stuff. It didn't work. Well, no.
And it didn't work. Yeah.
You didn't try it, right? So that is my frustration. And then last little piece to touch on. Well, you might have a question, and then I'll talk about kind of my opinion of Amazon.
Well, I was just going to say that I have tried it several times, bought it because I didn't know about your company. Bought it from a few places. I had a friend recommend, hey, try this one. I think it is legit. And some of the time I didn't notice anything, but there was one, I don't even remember which one, because this was 7 years ago. There was one where I took it and I felt more energy, and I was like, oh, wow, that's different. And I noticed a buzzing in my body, and I'm like, because I'm very, I don't want to say sensitive, but I'm very in tune. And I'm like, this is different. There's something, and I could feel it. And I was like, this is cool. And we were feeding it to our cats. And, hey, our cats lived really long. One lived to 18, one lived to 20, so where our cats, I wish I'd, known about it sooner. But I felt something, and I thought that was really interesting. But I knew about how I don't want to say shady the industry is, but just like people were popping up because Cliff High and other people were talking about how exciting C60 is. There's a lot of guys going, hey, I can make a quick buck. I can say there's C60 in this bottle of oil with
charcoal
with carbon powder in it. Like anyone could just say you're selling C60, right? Whereas you're legit. You're the OG. And so I'm very, very excited to learn from you about this. And I definitely want to get into the mechanism of action and how it works in the body. And I also have this burning question, which is, does this exist in nature? But before you answer that, I know you had a final point to say.
Yeah, well, and just kind of to wrap up the industry, our policy, and this is on a case-by-case basis, we tested 22 of the products in the market, and we found all but one. Of course, ours was good, but all but one other brand was woefully low in concentration. So we do have a policy that if you send us your bottle, we don't want it to be empty, right? Like we'll do the right thing. We will replace it for free.
So sorry, send you which bottle? A bottle of someone else's?
The bottle of somebody else's. Because this is how strongly, this is how strongly we feel about what a high quality product we have. So we just have very little doubt that people are going to stay on our product after that. And
you're like on behalf of the C60 industry, I apologize for the fraudulent C60 you bought. Please don't blame this. C60 is wonderful. Here, I'll give you a free bottle. I love you, Chris. That's the thing I would do. That's so cool of you.
Thank you. No, and again, like and I'll be honest, it took us a while to get to this point. My whole journey with this molecule is as skeptical as probably the most skeptical person in your audience, right? When we're selling this, so interesting. When you finally got the right one, you had some good experience on it. You're in tune. I want to believe like I'm enlightened and in tune with my body. I just have too many examples where that's not true. like, oh, I answered the question wrong. Like, do you have pain when you walk in the morning? Was a question. I was like, no, I don't. And then he pushed the question further and he's like, oh, actually, I kind of limp until I get warmed up, right? Like, I'm not as in tuned as I would like to be. So I'm not really having experiences. And we have some percentage of our customers, and I'll tell some examples kind of down the road where, I didn't really notice anything, but when they stop taking it, they're like, oh, now I see what I'm missing, right? And so it can be subtle. So that's the other kind of, challenge is you get this other product, and if you kind of dig into the research, there's a lot of people will share like, hey, it can be subtle. Think about sleep, our most consistent testimonial. Unless you're like Brian Johnson, you're getting an extra 30 minutes or an hour or less of sleep per night. And if you start taking something and that just becomes 30 minutes more of sleep per night consistently, or even just deeper sleep, which is actually our more consistent testimonial, are you going to attribute it to that thing you took, right? And so it can be pretty subtle. Yeah, and in terms of Amazon, the way I describe it is just be careful on Amazon. You really, unfortunately, in the supplement industry, you need to do the research on the company, on the founders, like get some sense of comfort with them. And I always ask, like, what does a 5-star review on Amazon mean about a supplement, right? About a cell phone, it means it works, right? About, I don't know, a cell phone charger, it works. But about a supplement, I always joke, it kind of just means that Amazon harassed that customer enough and they didn't die before they left the review. Because think about, let's just take, it's pretty brutal. But
because if you die, you're not leaving the bad review.
Exactly. Your family's not going back and saying, hey, this may not be related, but we thought we would share.
You're funny.
By the way, it's the cell phone's fault. Anyway, so think about what a 5-star review review of say a vitamin C, right? I think we can agree that they don't have an HPLC and they didn't crush it up and make sure it was ascorbic acid, right? Like that didn't happen. I think we can agree they don't have a lab scale and they didn't make sure that every tablet was 1 gram. In reality, they probably didn't even count if there were 90 or 95 or 85 tablets in the jar. It literally just means they got harassed until they left a 5-star review. So be very weary when you're on Amazon, kind of assuming the reviews. And we are on Amazon, right? Some people like the convenience. By the way, our shipping only doesn't equal or beat them over weekends. We actually had somebody place an order at like 7 p.m. on a Friday and sent us a note at 9 a.m. on a Monday and was like, why isn't it here yet? Because, Amazon has spoiled everyone. And we're like, because we're not Amazon and we went home for the weekend. It'll be there in 2 days.
That's funny. Does this exist in nature?
Oh, yes. So, it does exist in nature, and everyone in your audience has been exposed to it. It exists in really large quantities. It turns out that Sir Harold Kroto was right that spectrum out in space was massive amounts of carbon-60.
So out in space, there's lots of antioxidants floating around?
Yeah, so you can, if the vacuum didn't kill you, you could have some benefits. We can actually talk about the antioxidants a little bit too. I'm sure I'll get to that.
Okay.
So if you collect the soot from a candle, right? So you usually do that by putting a cold steel plate over the candle. And that deep, dark soot has parts per million or parts per billion of what we would call the ESS60 molecule. So we have literally all been exposed to it, just not in the quantities necessary to put into a supplement. And then, I've already described the extremely challenging process of manufacturing the molecule, which doesn't even talk about. So real quick, you're vaporizing these graphite rods. You create what's called a fullerenic soot because it has some amount of fullerenes in it. That amount on a good day is 10%. So you have 90% carbon garbage and 10% fullerenic soot. Of that 10% fullerenic soot, about 80 to 90% of that is C60. So we would consider that for industrial applications. And then after you refine that and bring it to a high concentration and then remove the solvents necessary to do that, you end up with what we would call ESS60.
You're mentioning solvents and things that, are concerning when we're putting stuff in our body. How do you test for purity to make sure there aren't any solvents or chemicals or carbon garbage, as you put it, so that, we know we're not also ingesting those things?
Yeah. Well, one is we've actually only refined our process since that original study, right? So we've had some people claim that they're making a carbon-60 using 0 solvents. And I've done videos on this. I could go into the details. It is in the realm of scientific possibility. It is not a feasible production process to put in any sort of consumer product. There's too much waste. It's extremely, and it's hard for me to emphasize how impractical this is. I think these companies believe that by going through what's called a sublimation process, that they're absolving themselves from the fact that it was at one point exposed to solvents. And that is absolutely not true. And like I said, I've done videos on this. I could go into it, but it's kind of a sidetrack down, people who make a lesser quality of a product. Mm-hmm. The reality is solvents are used regularly. Anytime you're thinking about some sort of plant extract, like in the holistic medicine aisle at HEB or whatever grocery store, those are typically extracted with solvents. And so the health and nutrition industry is very comfortable working with solvents. When people were like, hey, their product might have some solvents left and ours doesn't, which I think is actually a false claim. Even if that were true, our product was used in a study where the rats lived 90% longer than the control group. Like,
Right.
what are you really
And
trying
they
to
didn't,
accomplish?
and they genetically always create tumors in their body, and these ones didn't. Like,
Yes.
like that is cool.
Yeah.
That's wild. But so I guess I just for those who are listening and they're like kind of concerned, like or put off from the mention of solvents. I know you probably have patented processes you can't exactly go into sharing, but what safeguards are done, either like testing afterwards, or what is done to know that this is clean and safe to consume?
Yeah, so we do a batch by batch process. Here's the reality: we actually do a batch by batch process on our ESS60. Right, so we're actually sending that off to a lab. That's not a piece of equipment that we have resident to look at what are the volatile compounds in there, right? And so those would be any residual solvents. Those, in full transparency, are typically one, below detectable limits or barely in detectable limits. And when I say barely in detectable limits, like I know that might make you nervous, that turns out to be 10,000 times lower than the EPA's acceptable amount in drinking water. Right.
Okay.
Right. So we're not even. I'm not saying that the EPA. We would really want zero, but we're scientists, and we don't. It's hard for us to speak in zero or a lot, right? So we speak in really small fractions, and again, 10,000 times lower than what the EPA. And again. Throw it into a study with Wistar rats. The Wistar rats live 90% longer. They are not suffering from toxic, toxic solvents.
Love it. Okay, so you test every batch. It's very, very clean according to the EPA standards.
And I want to touch on the test every batch because, a lot of companies will claim this, and I think that's good, and hopefully they are, in fact, doing it. We actually have the equipment to test it here, so we're more diligent, right? And people can get nervous, oh, you're testing. No, we do also do third-party testing. But the advantage that in-house testing gives us is it's not a line item, right? Every time you send out a test, if you don't have the equipment, it's $150 to $300 for that test, right? And so you're like, we got to save money, we got to be an efficient company. Those are smart things, but it suffers in this area where we're just like, hey, go inject this, see what it looks like. And I think that's manifested. I mentioned we tested 22 of the products in the market, and they're woefully low in concentration. I think the reason, and I'm very altruistic, I think these companies are trying to do the right thing. In the original study, they mixed the product in an Erlenmeyer flask. Now, that's that kind of triangular shape flask. They had a little magnetic stirrer, and they mixed it for 2 weeks. And that's when they got to the max concentration of the ESS60 molecule in the olive oil. And that's what everybody was doing. We're doing it, confirming our concentration. And then as we kind of grow as a company, you start mixing in bigger and bigger volumes. We're doing like 100-liter batches now. That 2 weeks is no longer 2 weeks. It's actually 3 weeks. And the way we find this out is we're actually testing multiple times in the batch, right? So as the batch is being produced, we understand when it's kind of reached peak concentration. In reality, we're scientists. There's an asymptotic curve, so you kind of get within that bandwidth of that peak concentration. And we found that because of the fluid dynamics, right? So you've got this powder in there and the oil, because of the fluid dynamics, it takes 3 weeks. So I believe that a lot of the companies that are woefully low in concentration don't have that testing protocol and just are doing 2 weeks and putting the product on the market because that's what they did in the original study, which, again, altruistically is nice, scientifically not the best decision.
What do you do for those 3 weeks to prevent the oil from oxidizing?
Excellent question. So it is in a sealed stainless steel container. It's got a nitrogen buffer gas at the top because in reality, This is spinning really, really quickly. There's actually a full vortex almost through the whole 100 liters. So if it were exposed to oxygen, we would actually be folding in oxygen, not an ideal scenario. And so we've got, nitrogen buffer gas tubes all over our production facility.
That's wonderful because just consuming oil that's been exposed to oxygen for 3 weeks while spinning, right? You'd be consuming rancid oil that would be actually consuming oxidative damage. You'd be creating more stress on the body.
Yep.
As a result, more inflammation on the body as a result. That's why a lot of doctors I interview say don't use cooking oil at all. Never use cooking oil, because oil that you buy in the store has been exposed to oxygen from the get-go, from the production facility. And so you're actually consuming rancid oil, and then cooking further would cause more oxidative stress on the body. So one sure way to decrease oxidative stress is to not eat fried foods, not use cooking oils at all. So I love that you said nitrogen chamber and making sure there's no oxygen there, because that would completely go against the health benefits of it. And I love that you guys are so diligently checking and figuring out the maximum saturation. That is really cool.
There is some, just to talk about oxidation for a minute, right? So a typical olive oil has a shelf life of 3 years. When we bottle it, we actually put 18 months on it, right? So we're conservative in that perspective. And there is good evidence that the presence of the ESS60 molecule has protective effects for the oil also. Well, so while it's in the container, there are protective effects for the oil due to the ESS60 molecule.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, like the C60 itself being an antioxidant, which we definitely want to eventually get into talking about, would help counteract that. Is there anything more about the process of producing it that you wanted to let us know about?
No, I think it's good. Maybe now's the time. This is maybe fun. So we talk science. Maybe we can talk like a little bit of story and about our kind of journey.
Yes.
Because so this is kind of fun, right? So this study comes out in mid 2012. The rats have lived 90% longer. About mid 2013, and this may have been Cliff Eye was really about 2017. So about 2013, we start getting these phone calls from this crazy, wacky group of people called biohackers. And I can say that now affectionately because I'm a biohacker. And they're like, hey, we saw those rats live longer. How much should we be taking? Now, you have to picture this ultra conservative carbon nanomaterial scientist hats that my business partner and I were wearing. And also think about what we were hearing in the question. Because the question to us was, hey, that's stuff that you sell to research institutions around the world to put into inks, batteries, tires, and photocells. How much of that stuff should I be consuming on a daily basis? and our response was, we think the answer should be zero. We actually added not for human consumption to our labeling in mid 2013. So think about that. From 1991 all the way to mid 2013, we don't have not for human consumption on our labeling because there's no crazy wacky biohackers involved yet. We added. and I also want to be clear, the literature was clear that it was safe. At this point, the rats had lived 90% longer. If anything's true, it's not toxic, but we're conservative carbon nanomaterial scientists. And we were actually getting together every quarter and deciding based on this kind of next part of the story. So we're getting 2 to 3 calls per week. The calls sound like this. Hey, Chris, my knee pain is gone. And I'm like, you mean the knee pain of your rat, right? Because it literally says not for human consumption on the labeling. And they're like, yeah. Hey, if my rat weighs 275 pounds and does HIIT training on Tuesdays and Thursdays, should they maybe be doubling dose on Tuesdays and Thursdays? So, we kind of know what's going on. We were only comfortable with it because it was clear in the literature that it was safe, but still conservative carbon nanomaterial scientists. So every quarter we're getting together. Do we want to get into this supplement industry? And, we've already kind of touched on it. It's a challenged industry. It's extremely different than delivering commercial quantities of carbon nanomaterials to research institutions around the world. I mean, they get our little black powder, they give it to a grad student or a research associate. They put it in an HPLC because they know how to do this. They confirmed that we shipped them what we sold them. We've already talked about the consumer nature of the supplement industry. They're not testing anything. They don't have the HPLC. This is an industry that just quarter after quarter we decide not to get into. In the middle of this, I found a research paper that said 50% of the supplements that this particular research group had purchased off the market, like general supplements, 50% of them did not have in them what they said they had in them, right?
Yep.
So this was just confirmation. This is not something we want to get into. It's kind of not in our pedigree. It's not in our bones. And then finally, it was literally Cliff High talking about it. And when he started talking about it, like literally, like that, he is the dude. Mm-hmm. And when he started talking about all the benefits he was getting, taking it on a daily basis, and then kind of all the science and sharing all the stories, our phone went from ringing 2 to 3 times a week to 10 times a day. And we looked back, and so now at that quarterly meeting in the conference rooms actually right behind me, in that quarterly meeting, we're assessing things differently, right? This is an entrepreneurial opportunity bigger than we realized. And if you think back to that paper that I had found where 50% of the supplements on the market don't have in them what they say they have in them, that's going to happen in this space. And we're the oldest and longest manufacturer and distributor of this molecule. We really, we have the production process, we have the equipment, we have the scientific knowledge, we know how to work with the material. We probably should get in the industry, not just for entrepreneurial, that's obvious, but also just to keep the consumer safe. And so in 2017, the end of 2017, we asked ourselves 2 questions. And the first question was a moral question. Are we comfortable selling this? And I take it, my wife takes it, obviously my business partner takes it. Everybody on our team here actually takes it. By the way, that's not a requirement to work here. It's not like clock in and take your shot. But they have access to the research, and probably more importantly, they have access to the testimonials of people calling into customer service, which we do handle here. And our customer service team has 1,000 5-star reviews on Google, so they're amazing. So yeah, we're comfortable selling it. I take it, my wife takes it, everybody on the team takes it. And then the next is the legal piece, the FDA and the FTC. We're crossing the T's, we're dotting the I's, and that's when we really started kind of bringing this to market, and where my role shifted as the chief scientist to kind of understand where this sits in the space of longevity, where it sits in the space of supplements in general. And then now we could, potentially start talking about these the potential methods of action.
Yes. Yeah. Mechanism of action. Awesome. Let's talk about it.
So as I mentioned, the first place that I landed was on sleep, right? If you improve sleep, you improve your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. And our product is really unique. Our most consistent testimonial is you take the product in the morning, you report mental focus and energy during the day, and then you have better sleep that night. And you've been doing this, 9 years? Have you kind of had an interview with somebody talking about something they could take in the morning and then positively impact sleep that night?
Very rare, but there are like things you could do. You could, get up in the morning, go outside in direct sunlight to get, the
circadian rhythm. Yep.
Get your circadian rhythm back in check. So there's certain
exercise.
There's certain things you could do in the morning that would positively impact your sleep, or like drink less caffeine in the morning, or drink less caffeine in general would improve your sleep. Get outside would improve your sleep. But I can't think of a specific supplement that if you took in the morning, other than like if you're deficient in magnesium, taking it anytime, getting your magnesium up would help. But that's because you were deficient. Magnesium doesn't treat sleep. The deficiency causes sleep problems, and by increasing your magnesium, you're solving that problem in the body, and you're going to get normal sleep, which to you feels like an improvement. So like that's the only thing I could think of.
No, and that's where I one person once mentioned to me ashwagandha, and then I had a conversation with an Ayurvedic practitioner, and they're like, well, you take it in the morning actually for focus and energy, but then you actually have to take it again at night, and it can help you sleep. And that's so it's a very unique process, and we'll talk into what we think it's doing in the mitochondria is why we think we have this benefit. But so the first place we landed was sleep. And then the next I was like, what does the medical community think about aging? How does it land with it? And they don't all agree, right? But a lot of them tend to think of it as an oxidation and an inflammation process. And when you think about oxidation, there are ad hoc studies on the web that shows our formula to be 172 times more powerful than vitamin C. There's peer-reviewed published research that shows it to be 125 times more powerful than vitamin C. So I'm in Texas, so we like to put a big old check mark on the antioxidant. When it comes to inflammation, and I think I alluded to this earlier, the FDA is very particular in how you speak about inflammation, because the FDA equates talking about chronic inflammation with the diseases of inflammation, which are also the diseases of aging, which are arthritis, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular diseases, cancers. So if I come here and I say, hey, we address chronic inflammation, what the FDA actually hears is me claiming I cure cancer, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, obviously not making those claims. So we have to be really careful. I mean, so much more research needs to go into those particular areas to kind of prove that up and be able to make those claims. But what the FDA will allow us to say is that we address inflammation associated with exercise-induced inflammation. So we've all had a tough workout, maybe just walked longer one day than normal and felt that inflammation in our body, and the FDA allows us to say that we address that inflammation. I'm going to go ahead and throw in some kind of cool studies that I've gone through that are kind of related to inflammation. By the way, about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, there was a publication released on beagles and the inflammatory status of beagles and how the product, I think in this case it was in grapeseed oil. Usually it's in olive oil, but in this case it was in grapeseed oil, how the product reduced the inflammation in beagles, the HSCRP in beagles. In my case, there was a health optimization summit in Austin, and we had a booth, and right next to us was a group who does ESR, erythrocyte sedimentation rate. He's got this piece of equipment, super cool, by the way. It's like a $300 piece of equipment, and then for $10 per test, you can actually have the results in 30 minutes. And what ESR is you take a drop of blood and you put, or two, in a capillary tube, and then you hold that capillary tube vertically, and the rate at which the blood cells separate from the plasma is an indication of your inflammatory state. So I took this study, or this test, and he has kind of an age component, like a biological age, and my result was that I was 20 plus years younger than my actual chronological age. So I'm pretty happy with this. The next test that I took, glycan age, you may be familiar with glycan age. It's looking at glycans and how they attach to different molecules in your blood. And this tends to have it's unidirectional. So it goes one direction as you age. And so they kind of make a biological age test out of it. It's also a very good indicator of inflammatory status. That particular study, when I took it, had me, I think it was 34 years younger biologically than my chronological age. So I also liked that test. Now, the next test I don't like as much, but I do like the direction. So I took my D and age, and when I was 51, it had me at 59. And you can, Ashley, you can imagine that was a little disappointing, right? Like I'm doing all the things. Like how am I, 8 years older than my chronological age? Here's the cool part. 3 years later, right? So when I was 54, it had me at 58. So in the span of 3 years, I had decreased my biological age by 1 year. So I don't like the numbers, but I do like the direction. And by the way, if you're following the Rejuvenation Olympics, right? These are the repeated biological tests that Brian Johnson is on, and many other biohackers and longevity experts. That would have put me, I think, by far in first place, because most of the results on the Rejuvenation Olympics right now are, for every year that passes, I'm aging 0.6 years or 0.5 years. And in this case, I actually aged negative 0.33 years over the course of those 3 years.
That's so much fun.
right? It is.
I love it. I love it. And I did one once, and I was a few years younger than my, my biological age was a few years younger than my chronological age. And then this really famous health guru published his studies, and he was like, biologically 1 year older than his chronological age, and we were about the same age, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, and he was shocked. He's like, I'm doing all the things, and he was expecting it to be a little better. But yeah, you say over time, it's better to do these tests over time, and also we can't put 100% of our faith into lab tests. Labs, we don't know, are they calibrating their machines? Did they like accidentally mix up our test tubes with someone else? Like there's a lot of variables, right? So we don't want to put 100% of our faith into labs. And also, if you really, really are shocked by a lab, maybe go get the same lab from a different company and just like double check that it wasn't, you always want to double check when it comes to health. And even like if it's your car, like if the mechanic is like, it'll be $5,000 for this, and you're like, I think I'm getting a second opinion, because a second opinion is going to probably save me $5,000. So, just always question, and don't put 100% of your faith into those. But at the same time, it can be really fun over time. Like I did this one little hacky. I wouldn't say I'm a biohacker, but I really appreciate what I learned from biohackers, and then I implement what I can into my life. And I think I do a lot more than most people. Like I'm a label reader, and I'll say no to a lot of foods, because every single thing that goes in your mouth is either building you up or breaking you down. And so we have to be really cautious of that. And I made one change. I was doing my labs every 3 months last year, and I did one change, and I cut my triglycerides in half. And I'm like, dang, that wasn't even that hard to do. That wasn't even that bad. It's pretty wild when you're watching your labs. And again, we don't want to say that like we always believe what the labs are, because it can differentiate depending on what day it is, what time it is, and also what lab you're going to. But just looking at it as a general idea, looking at your labs, and then over time looking at the trend, like am I, is something trending in the wrong direction, or is something trending in the right direction? And then go, okay, I'm going to keep doing that good behavior because I'm seeing it in the labs. But most importantly is checking in with our body. I've got a symptom inventory checklist in my book. Addicted to Wellness is the name of my book. And I've got this symptom inventory checklist, and I guide people through how to do it. And when anyone works with me as a client, I give it to them as well. And I firmly believe we should do it once a month, just a once a month check-in. You could do it. You can check in with yourself daily and weekly, but once a month, you write down all the symptoms you could think about that you've had this last month. And there's prompts that help you. And then you grade them, frequency, duration, and intensity. So how many times a week or a day or a month, and how long did it last? Like, for example, a headache, it lasted 4 hours. And then intensity would be like a 1 out of 10. And certain symptoms you can't, give it like a 1 out of 10. It's either you have it or you don't. But like if it's a pain, it's kind of like, it's a 5 or it's a 2. And if you do this every month, as you are making health changes, like for example, adding this my Vital C to your life, and then you score again. You don't look at what you wrote the last month. You do a fresh one, and then when you finish it, then you compare it to the month before and the month before that, and you'll be surprised. My clients are always shocked. Because at first they're like, they'll tell me, I'm like, how'd you do this month? They're like, well, I don't think anything, I don't know, maybe a little bit improvement. I don't think anything really changed. I'm like, okay, let's do your symptom inventory checklist. And then afterwards, like, oh my gosh, we cut the list in half, like half.
Amazing.
I once had a client, this is the biggest success story I've had since like 2011, working with clients I work with clients since 2005, but since 2011, it's been in the health focus. And in 2005 to 2011, I was helping people to eliminate anxiety and doing emotional work and mental work and neurolinguistic programming and timeline therapy. So since 2011, I had one client who had 26 pages back to back. He wrote out with symptoms. He was in really rough shape. And in my first month of making some the kind of foundational health changes, we got it down to about half a page. And it was wild.
Wow.
It was, most people will come to me and they'll fill out between 1 and 2 pages of symptoms. Like if we really dig in, and if you come to me with like half a page of symptoms, then we just see them decrease and decrease and decrease, because we're making these changes that work, because it works for everyone, because this is how the body works. It's not cookie cutter, but it's kind of like if you're dehydrated, like 100% of people benefit from drinking enough water. There's certain things that are just foundationally cookie cutter. And so making sure that we've got that covered, a lot of stuff just drops off. So it's a symptom inventory checklist, and it's worth investing in yourself to do it monthly. Just like labs are something good to just look at and just have as a marker, have to remind us, because we can catch disease pretty early and then go in the opposite direction of that, right? But your body is speaking to you. And I've been taught by my mentors in naturopathic medicine how to hear the symptoms of the body and discern what that means. But you can too. So when you go to an MD, they're reductionistic in their thinking, and one MD will send you to a GI specialist, and the other will send you to a neurologist, and one will send you to a gastroenterologist, and it could all be the same problem. The root cause could all actually be from the same thing, but they are not seeing it because they reduce you into your parts, like you're a machine. Whereas in holistic medicine, we're looking at the body as a whole, listening to the symptoms and going, oh, these symptoms, even though they're kind of like coming from different areas, they're all speaking the same thing. They're pointing to the same thing. And that's why the symptom inventory checklist really helps, because we forget. When a problem goes away, we forget. I have had two, and listeners who've listened to the show multiple times have heard me say this, because it just shocks me. I've had 2 clients who literally forgot they ever had migraines. When they came to me, they suffered from migraines. After 3 to 6 months of changing their lifestyle and their diet, completely forgot the reason. One of the reasons why they came to me, one of their biggest health complaints had been, just 6 months before, had been debilitating migraines. I had to remind them. We had to go back and show, they're like, oh my gosh, I haven't had one in so long, I forgot I ever had them. And so we do that. Like, I could say, what did you eat last Tuesday and how did you feel after that meal? And you're like, I don't remember what I had for dinner last night, right? So we don't remember how we feel. And so if we start taking a new supplement, right, or changing, I'm going to go to bed an hour earlier, right, or just doing something generally healthier for us. I'm going to drink 2 cups of water right when I wake up first thing in the morning and go outside, or just making these simple changes. Like we'll hear a podcast and make a change, but then a week later we stop doing it because we're not really tracking, right? And we don't really get that the long-term benefit that built us up so much. But I've had clients who every year their whole family gets sick all winter long. They catch every cold and flu, and then they work with me and they're like, oh my gosh, none of us took sick days off. I can't believe it. Our kids never had to miss school or whatever. And they just realized that after, 6 months to a year of making these simple changes, that was the metric. Like, I looked and I have all my sick days. Like, I didn't need to take any off, and my kids weren't absent from school. Whereas the last 5 years we were. These things you don't feel on a day-to-day basis. So you don't get how important the health changes are, because it's not something you feel, but you look and you go, that is measurable. Like, people can see, a third person can come in and observe and go, wow, it's whatever you're doing is working. So I love the symptom inventory checklist, because you will forget how crappy you felt before your health change, before this new health habit you took on. And that's why I love my book, because it's all about getting in tune with your body and then tracking it over time. And there's 33 health habits that build up your foundation of health in my book. I didn't mean for this to be a little commercial for my book, but it really is I wish I could give a copy of my book for free to everyone. You know what I mean? Just like
Yep.
hand over a physical. If I was like a millionaire, I'd be in the street just handing it out. My husband, for fun, because we bought a case of my books when it came out, he went around to those little libraries in communities where it's just like a
Oh
box,
yeah.
like in a neighborhood. My husband went around and put my book, and because we go for walks in my neighborhood, so we walk by a bunch of these little just little libraries that are just kind of like, it looks like a mailbox, but you open it and you see books inside, and it's like, take a book or leave a book or whatever. And he would go around and leave them, and then he'd come back the next day and go for a walk, and they'd be gone. And he's like, "Yes, we helped someone. This is so exciting."
That's cool.
So that tool, and you can buy my book because it's easy and it's all laid out there, and I guide you through it. Addicted to Wellness is the book. You can get it on Amazon, or you can go on my website, learnyourhealth.com. But you could also just open an Excel spreadsheet, and it's easier if you do my process because I prompt you, but so you don't have to like reinvent the wheel. But track your symptoms every month as you make health changes, and everyone is surprised. Everyone goes, "Oh wow, that got better," and they didn't know it, because in the moment you can't compare how you felt a month ago. So I love that you did this thing where you questioned people and got that feedback, even though it's just 10 people, but that's where studies begin.
Mm-hmm.
We have to get a small cross section to go like, is it even worth investing in 100 people or 1,000 people, a bigger study? And what you got literally 100% success rate. So you're like, this is viable to now invest in a bigger study.
Yeah. No, and that's exactly what we're doing. And you said so many things right there that resonate, and as we kind of maybe talk about benefits people have shared with our product. Migraines is one of them. As you're talking about people who have forgotten migraines, I tend to tell the story regularly, so I don't forget about it. But I certainly fit into the category, as in the example I gave earlier, where like, do my feet hurt when I wake up, and not realizing it because it's just how they feel in the morning. We even with our packages actually have little trackers where you can track like sleep and how you feel, and it's very rudimentary. It's not as nearly as complex as what you're describing, and although it's not complex, it's just not as in depth is probably the right answer. So because sometimes these things can be very subtle, and sometimes humans are flawed in their ability to kind of look back and see if some changes have been made. I really think one of the challenges with biological age testing is that some people go into it, right? And this one said I was 59 when I was 51, and like, oh, I'm going to die sooner. And I don't think that's what those are. I think they are this really good qualitative tool for understanding, are you making progress? Are you going in the wrong direction?
Yeah, don't judge the first result. It's more like over time, get this test over and over and see if you're trending in the right direction.
Yeah. And it will tell you, are the things that you're doing the right things? And you brought up migraines. Maybe now we can start talking about kind of the deep down theory that we've kind of landed on for our molecule.
Yeah, because after that rat study, I'm sure people were scratching their head going, what is this doing in the body that's elongating life, but also preventing the rat's natural tumor production, right? Like, this is wild. What is going on inside the body? So what do we think the mechanism of action is?
So our current theory is by the way, people scratching their head trying to figure out what's going on. Nobody was doing that more than me, because that was actually literally my job. So our current theory, we call it the BOSS theory. So buffering oxidative stress system. I'm going to get a little kind of sciencey. I have a fun analogy to pull this all together. We know from peer-reviewed published research that this C60, this soccer ball-shaped molecule, gets into the mitochondria. And I think I mentioned earlier that we know from way back in the 90s when it was discovered that it can hold up to 6 negatively charged particles on the exterior of the cage. And how that manifests, we think, in this BOSS theory is I can kind of brief refresh. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of every cell. There's between 50 and 5,000 mitochondria in every cell in your body, except for your blood cells, which have 0, and your brain and neurons, which have 2 million. It's amazing how much energy our nervous system uses relative to our other systems. Like any power source, right? The mitochondria is the power source. Like any power source, there is a negative byproduct. You think about your car going down the road, it has exhaust. You think about a power plant, it's got smoke coming out of the smokestack. In the case of mitochondria, you've got reactive oxygen species. I like to think about these like little bumper cars running around, rusting everything they slam into, causing oxidative stress, oxidative damage, and ultimately inflammaging, right? That's a fun word, the confluence of inflammation and aging. And that's where, so internal to the mitochondria, you actually have the antioxidants glutathione and melatonin to manage those reactive oxygen species. But what happens when you stress a mitochondria? First question is like, well, how do you stress a mitochondria? I like to joke, you live in modern society, right? Like there are so many stressors around. You are stressing your mitochondria. And if you're doing the right things, right? Like you should be doing some HIIT training. You should be doing some strength training. If you go on an airplane, you get more exposure to EMF radiation. It can be a tough conversation with a loved one, a tough email. Like there is stress everywhere. And when you stress your mitochondria, you actually increase the number of reactive oxygen species and you overwhelm the resident glutathione and melatonin. And that's where we think the C60 molecule comes in. Again, we know from peer-reviewed published research, it gets into the mitochondria, and we believe that what it does is it holds on to those reactive oxygen species so they can't do any damage until that glutathione replenishes the melatonin and the glutathione to manage those reactive oxygen species appropriately. So I've got a fun analogy. Maybe you would agree that I believe all biological analogies should start with Mardi Gras. A lot of biology happens at Mardi Gras, so why not? So it's the end of Mardi Gras, and you're on Bourbon Street, and you've got these drunk reactive oxygen species causing oxidative stress, oxidative damage, painting cars, smashing windows, all that stuff. And you've got the New Orleans Police Department, the glutathione and the melatonin, who come onto Bourbon Street. They handcuff themselves to those reactive oxygen species and get them off of Bourbon Street. But what does the New Orleans Police Department do when they get overwhelmed? They actually take those reactive oxygen species and they stick them in a paddy wagon. They attach them to the C60 molecule so they can't do any damage. And then when the New Orleans Police Department replenishes the glutathione, replenishes the melatonin, then they're able to handcuff themselves to those reactive oxygen species and get them off of Bourbon Street. And that's why we say that this C60 molecule is the boss, a buffering oxidative stress system. And kind of the summary of that is we believe we're reducing the negative impact of stressed mitochondria. And if you reduce the impact of stressed mitochondria, you should have head-to-toe testimonials in kind of every kind of body system. And we certainly do have that.
Especially neurological and degenerative.
So I
imagine.
Let's jump into migraines right away because you mentioned it already. So my personal experience, by the way, I'm going to be sharing some experiences. I'll throw in the FDA disclaimer, right? The FDA has not evaluated our product. It is not intended to treat, diagnose, cure, or prevent any disease. And as I share anecdotes, I always like to share, hey, just assume this isn't going to happen for you. If you dig into the research and if you kind of listen to this podcast and it resonates with you, we do have a link. You'll be able to find it, and you can go from there and do some testing yourself. In my case, I really am this geeky scientist. I have a spreadsheet that goes back to 2014 of me tracking my migraines. So I'd get 4 to 5 migraines per year. And I was tracking them, trying to stop them. If you've never had them, I can assure you they really, really suck. So I'm trying to track them, figure out what's going on. when I started taking our product on a regular basis in 2018, I didn't get a single migraine. I think it was for about 18 months. And actually, the first migraine I got after that time period was when I went off of the product to join the sleep study, right? I told you the sleep study is a crossover and you go off of it for 10 days. And that 10 days that I went off of it, I got a migraine. And
Wow.
I'll share, I get 1 or 2 per year. But the difference between what they are and what they were, now I'll get an aura, right? So I get this kind of little piece in my field of vision that kind of looks like a kaleidoscope. It'll start on the side of my vision, go to the middle, lasts about 15, maybe 20 minutes. I can literally work through it. Like most migraine sufferers, when they're experiencing a migraine, and this was true of me, need to go to a dark room. It needs to be cold. There can be no sound. There can be no light. I'm literally able to work through the migraines now. I also like to couple that, my experience, with my wife. So my wife used to get 9+ migraines per month. And I remember the number 9 because she had a medication and they would only give her 9 per month. And so she actually got like around 13. She would just have to suffer through those additional 4 without this medication. She's my spouse, so it took me a while to convince her to try my product, right? Like, what do you know about supplements? You're a carbon nanomaterial scientist. I don't necessarily blame her even. But I finally got her to try the product, and she went down from that 9+ to 1 or 2 a month, or even every other month. And so, yeah, if you're talking about reducing the negative impact of stressed mitochondria, and every brain cell has 2 million mitochondria, then you're having this kind of really positive impact.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it so much. What about SOD? Does it help do we think it helps increase SOD or work with SOD? The superoxide dismutase.
Yeah, I just had an interview with Dr. Nayan Patel. He's got a glutathione product on the market and a book called The Glutathione Revolution. And as I was reading like the first 2 chapters of his book talking about glutathione in the mitochondria and how it reacts and how actually vitamin C will replenish glutathione, I'm about to have a conversation with him, just a freestyle, hey, how might there be synergies between ESS60 and glutathione? Maybe it's taking a role of vitamin C, etc. I haven't really looked at SOD, but I do have a different model because I think this might explain it. And I'm trying to think. Let me first talk about we've got an extreme case, right? If we want to talk about stressing mitochondria, my friend Anthony Kunkel, he's a 2-time U.S. ultra running champion. If anybody stresses mitochondria, he does. At any given point, he's running 200 miles a week. He's won a U.S. championship at 50 miles, and he's won a U.S. championship at 50K, which is 62 miles. My first conversation, it's crazy. My first conversation with him was fascinating. He said, Chris, I was taking 1 serving of the formula. I didn't really notice anything. I joke, like all good biohackers, I tripled the serving. By the way, don't triple. Don't triple everything.
Oh my gosh.
There are things.
I might be a biohacker.
Like the first thing that pops to my mind, if you're playing around with rapamycin, do not triple it, right? But he tripled it, and he said, I was blown away. I believe that your product could be the difference between somebody having running as a hobby and running as a career. He went on to say, I don't think your product speeds exercise recovery. I believe it prevents damage in the first place. And the reason I say that, he said that, is because on the last 5 miles of a 50-mile run, by the way, that's a phrase I will only ever hear from Anthony, like ever. But on the last 5 miles of a 50-mile run where strength and stability were previously a problem, they are no longer a problem. And I kind of mapped this out in my mind with this analogy. The reality is stress is good for us, right? If we don't have stress, we just kind of will turn into like an amoeba-like blob. And if you have any doubts about that, think about astronauts, right? Astronauts, when they come back from space, from even relatively short trips, their bone density has decreased. Their immune system is compromised just by this kind of reduction in the stress of gravity. So I picture our physiology as this beautiful prairie with prairie grasses and flowers flowing in the wind. And the rain, the gentle rain, is the stress, this positive, good stress that we need. But what happens when you do something like Anthony Kunkel, like run 30 miles in a day? I picture it like this deep, dark cloud over the prairie, pouring down rain like a stream of water onto the prairie. And what's that going to do? That's going to damage, it's going to impinge on the prairie and like create this hole, this mud pit. And that's where I like to picture the C60 molecule coming in between the cloud and the prairie and acting like a sponge, holding on to that stress. Now, it's important to note, if you don't manage that deep, dark cloud, eventually the sponge will fill up and it'll start pouring on the prairie again, right? So this is a buffer, not an absolute solution. And then when that cloud goes away, right? So when he's finished his 30-mile run, then you can kind of picture gently squeezing the sponge across the prairie. And so now you've gotten away without doing the actual damage. So kind of in comparison with SOD, I think as you utilize it and deplete it, that's when you have this challenge with reactive oxygen species that they start to do damage. And that's where we believe the ESS60 molecule comes in and acts as that buffer, holding on to that stream of water until you can move past that stress point. And then now your body can replenish glutathione, melatonin, SOD, and actually manage those reactive oxygen species.
So for those who didn't take biology in college, your cell has powerhouses called mitochondria. It produces ATP, which is cellular energy, and like a car, it has exhaust. The exhaust is damaging the body, and the body has molecules that it produces like glutathione, SOD, melatonin to come in and mop it up. But because we live in a world where we're not living optimally, we're kind of pushing ourselves to the max. The mitochondria are creating more exhaust than we're able to catch up and keep up to. And it's possible that we're not living a lifestyle and eating healthy enough to produce adequate amounts of melatonin and SOD and all the other antioxidants in the body. Like, we are not maybe consuming like enough vitamin C, for example, because we're not eating. Our plate isn't filled with the rainbow. And then even if it is, are we getting it from, is it really fresh? Was it grown in mineral rich soil? Was it even grown in soil? Like that had minerals? It could be hydroponically grown. Most people aren't. So they're not getting adequate nutrition. So even if they're like, well, I don't really go to the gym, I don't really stress myself out. Your just daily living is producing these reactive oxygen species, which then is damaging us from the inside out, like inside our cells, is aging or inflammation. I love that term. Damaging ourselves from the inside at the cellular level because we're not doing what we need to do in our lifestyle to produce enough antioxidants, right? To bring it to squelch the flames.
Exactly.
And so the C60 comes around and holds it in prison, basically holds these the bad guys in prison so they can't do the damage in the first place, and then holds them there until the body can mop it up. What about? Are we concerned about a buildup of C60, since you're saying it's apparently crossing the blood-brain barrier, mm-hmm. right? It's getting inside our cells. And if it's getting inside our cells, does it naturally leave the body or does it accumulate? Are we concerned about that?
Yeah, so, well, yes, you should be concerned about that. The research suggests that it's excreted after about 10 days. And we also have some really good parallels. I kind of mentioned some clients will not, come back to us and, hey, I want to cancel my subscription. I haven't really noticed anything. I literally have one, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. I canceled it because I didn't notice anything. And then as soon as I stopped taking it, right at about the 10-day point, I realized what I was missing, and I will never stop taking your product, right? Like that's the kind of thing. I'll share my business coach. The way he describes it is for 50 years, he needed the alarm clock. Once he started taking the formula, he wakes up before the alarm clock. And, he's a business coach. He's got late nights. He's got dinners, mixers, whatever. None of that really matters. He wakes up before the alarm clock. When I don't get him any product at about the 10-day point, he's like, hey, he sends me a text. I'm needing my alarm clock again, which is, code for he needs another supply. So, yeah, data suggests that it's excreted in 10 days.
So, I mean, I'm just going to play the devil's advocate here because I am also skeptical, but I'm a big open-minded skeptic. So I'm thinking to myself, what if it stays in the cell and then it mops up, it kind of gets full, right? Like you stop taking it, and it gets full of all of the
free radicals.
Free radicals. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And those free radicals get mopped up and it holds on to them, right? And then they run out, right? So it's held it, but I'm just thinking about what proves that it clears the body, it doesn't accumulate or cause a negative impact in the long term. Because what if it stays there and kind of just like, I guess the cells naturally turn over anyway. But do you see what I mean?
Yeah, that's some of it, right? Natural cell turnover. But even in these studies, and these are animal studies, they're tracking how much of the molecule is coming out in the feces, and they're mapping to the amount that was given to the animal models, and saying that the research suggests it's out in 10 days, right? So that's one piece.
Got it. So then it's processed by the liver. If it's coming out through the feces.
Yes, 100%. It turns out, so this is extremely fascinating because we haven't even gotten like why olive oil. If you were to hold this black powder, right, because it's carbon, it's a black powder, it's crystalline powder, kind of like sugar crystals or salt crystals, just black. If it's C60, you can consume it safely and excrete it because it's not water soluble. But it's not very bioavailable because it's not water soluble. That's the reason we dissolve it in olive oil. And once you dissolve it, you get it down to these individual soccer ball molecules, these individual ESS60 molecules. And now it's basically infinitely more bioavailable than the crystals. But it's still not water soluble, right? So your body's using it, with the lipid that's gotten into the body with, getting through the lipid layers of the cells, even into the mitochondria. And then when it's done, it's going out through the feces because it never transitions to a water soluble version.
Carbon is so interesting. So I interviewed Dr. Jay Davidson a few years ago, and this isn't C60 by any means, but it's he uses different carbons to mop up the waste from dying parasites. And he has a whole parasite protocol, and I decided to take it. He sent me a kit, and I decided to take it. And it's very strict. You've all day long you're taking a certain some herb or something, and then in between these herbs it has to always be on empty stomach. And so you just have to really time your meals and this whole thing. And then in between you take like 4 or 5 of these large capsules of this carbon, which, it's like activated carbon, but it's a special kind of activated carbon. And he explains that, the body absorbs something like only 30% of it, which is a lot compared to others. And it helps to neutralize the those really nasty chemicals left behind from dying and dead parasites. I didn't even know I had parasites, but I'm like, you know what? I lived here long enough. I ate enough sushi. I probably got something, right? Like good, might as well do it. And for the first few days, I was totally fine. Didn't feel any problems, was doing great. And then one day got super busy, had a lot of friends come over, and I took the herbs And these herbs, I've taken them in the past. I haven't, I know I'm not like having a bad reaction or anything, but I took the herbs and I forgot to do the carbon. And the next morning I woke up feeling like I was dying. I was so sick. And then I realized, oh, I forgot the carbon the next day. And so I took a bunch of it and drank some water
Was it
and chilled out.
approximately three times as much?
Yes.
I tripled the serving.
Literally handfuls. I was like, gotta get this, because I felt like death turned over. And then, and I still slowly started to feel better. And then, eventually that day I got back to feeling 100%, but I was like, oh, this really does do something. And he explained that it mops up the basically parasite toxins. And that was how I knew this thing works. And I've had a few times where I've had like only a handful of times where I've had feeling like maybe food poisoning or feeling like I'm just not 100%. And I'll take some of that supplement, which again is just carbon, like activated charcoal kind of thing. And it actually really helps. I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. So just carbon in general and I know C60 very different from, like you said, even C59, right? Like it's going to be very different because of the structure when it comes to the chemistry and how it interacts with your body. But like it's kind of fun to think about that we could play around with different carbons just as a medicine. And as a side note, my husband's grandfather was a professor at Caltech, along with Einstein. Einstein like came over for dinner and they knew each other, and it was really cool.
That's super cool.
They didn't like work on the same projects, but he invented a medicine that the whole family uses, and it's carbon based. And there's different carbons in it, and silver in it and everything, and it'll cure sore throat just like in 2 seconds. And that the whole family never used antibiotics because of his little invention. He never sold it. It was just for friends and family. But just how cool you can really geek out on how neat carbon is as a medicine.
So I want to take this to even another level, right? Because one of the things that is true about almost every form of carbon is the molecules, the structures are too big to cross the gut barrier. Right, so the magic that this is doing is actually in your intestinal tract, and we did a brief study. We took some of the kind of the leftover products, which were still fullerene rich, relatively speaking, gave them to the University of Houston Mechanical Engineering Department, and they came back and said that this sample is as good or better than activated charcoal. Now, if you kind of extrapolate that and say, well, this C60 molecule, it's carbon, it's got certainly some activated carbon-like attributes, but it's actually able to get into your system. And is it actually binding with things that are in your system that that can't be tackled by activated charcoal unless you kind of get into that liver and bile loop? So like you're right. It's really fascinating.
I love it. So yours, we know because it's the way it's dissolved in olive oil. And you were going to say why olive oil, but we needs to be fat soluble in order to be absorbed and utilized by the body. But there's other oils out there, and I appreciate that you stick to the original study, because the original study showed that just olive oil alone, and this has to be quality olive oil. It can't be olive oil that's been exposed to oxygen, and heat and sunlight and whatever. Like it needs to, there's medicinal properties in olive. And honestly, like you could just go eat olives and you'd be getting even more benefit because you'd be getting the minerals and the fiber and the phytonutrients. So like olives are healthy, and everything in moderation, but olives are healthy. So it has to be dissolved, and you have it dissolved in the maximum amount of saturation in olive oil, for it to get inside the body, past the gut barrier, so that our body can utilize it.
Yep, exactly.
Awesome. So there's the mechanism of action, and was there anything more that you're going to touch on when it comes to how it acts as an antioxidant, or we've kind of well established the theory.
Well, I think there's one other piece that one, I want to kind of close the loop on, we talked about the Petri dish, right, with the cancer cells and the healthy cells, and why might that have happened? And we know that the mitochondria of cancer cells operate differently than the mitochondria of healthy cells. And so that's where my current theory lands, is like, we've got this boss theory. It's reducing the negative impact of stress mitochondria. Introducing a poison is a way to stress mitochondria. But it actually functions differently, like the energy source is different. So I think that's part of what's going on in that Petri dish. And, you talked about being concerned with antioxidants during cancer protocols, right? Your doctors will, hey, eat Twinkies, don't eat fruit. Not my recommendation, just a humorous
It's an oncologist.
Right. The reality is that the ESS60 molecule is a selective antioxidant, because the same is actually true if you're a bodybuilder or if you're doing these things that require a hormetic response, right? The bodybuilders will lift weights, and everybody should be lifting heavy things to maintain their muscle mass. Your goal is to break down the muscle and then have this hormetic response of growth or strengthening, right? And it's well documented that too many antioxidants will stop that, just like you'll have a negative impact on the cancer treatment. But that's not true of things like hydrogen, a selective antioxidant, and this ESS60 molecule, right? Because remember, when we discussed what it can hold on the exterior of the cage, it's negatively charged particles. It's not positively charged particles, and there's some chemical stuff you can do. But it turns out that when you're in a mitochondria, it's producing both negative and positively charged reactive oxygen species. And it turns out that the negatively charged ones are the ones that do more damage and less signaling. We kind of know that we need these reactive oxygen species to run around and do signaling, saying, hey, we've got muscles over here that need to be attended to, right? And it turns out that the positively charged ones do less damage and more signaling. And so this is that selective antioxidant piece of the molecule.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. My brain is just like exploding with excitement. Like, this is really, really interesting. So it's mitigating the unhealthy stress while not even touching the healthy stress.
Yep.
That's like heaven. That's like, what a perfect balance.
And again,
that's so cool.
if that's what we're doing, we should have head-to-toe testimonials, and in fact, we do.
All right, let's get into it. Let's talk about the testimonials.
So one of my favorite, because it includes arguably the worst testimonial about a supplement ever, is there's a lady, Gwen, here in town, and she's the largest distributor of our product in Houston. And she originally purchased the product for her dog. She has a Pekingese, and she had no intent on taking the product. So she orders the product for her dog, notices such a profound difference in her dog. And I like to pause here because, we've been talking for almost 2 hours here. Still, people should have their radars up, right? Like, this is new. This is fantastic. Is placebo going on here? By the way, I will tell you, it is, just like it occurs with everything you ever take, right? So when you're taking that statin, that works. When you're taking that vitamin C to get over the cold, that works. Like, the placebo is, in fact, everywhere. But one place that it is not is with pets, right? So
and babies.
Right?
Pets and babies.
So with pets, there's, ironically, they're not smart enough to know that they got the dropper, and so they're supposed to be more youthful that day. They just act the way they feel. So Gwen noticed such a profound difference in her dog. She starts taking the product. I actually recorded a video with her, and she said, Chris, if you had asked me at the 3-month mark if I'd noticed anything, my first response would have been no. I would have just said, I haven't really noticed anything. But I slowed down and I took stock of my life. I was working a little bit later. I was waking up earlier. I was never really a morning person. And then arguably the worst testimonial about a supplement ever, I cleaned my garage. So we don't use that anymore.
I laugh because I've done this.
Right? and it was you probably pushed it off for a bit of time before you actually got to it, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's funny, and we don't use it in marketing material, but it does mean something, right? It's a bigger task. It's a task potentially with some emotional baggage in the garage, and so ultimately it does mean something. And I think what drives it is, I'll give you my kind of sleep testimonial. I have to embarrassingly admit that I used to take 2 naps before noon on Saturdays and Sundays. And what that would look like, my wife and I have twins. When they were younger, they want to wake up and watch cartoons. So I would go down, I would lay down on the couch, and they would like physically sit on top of me while I'm taking my first nap. Somebody pointed out that's a really good parenting technique, because if they get up to mess with anything, they'll wake you up. So I took the first nap, and then we would go downstairs for breakfast, come back up, resume the position, and I literally would take 2. If we were out of town or if we had something to do, obviously I wasn't taking naps, but I would every Saturday and Sunday take 2 naps before noon. And then when I started taking the product regularly, which took a little while, because I'm like you were talking about, I took the herbs and not the carbon. That's me, right? I'm not a great, my compliance on medical or wellness efforts is not that great. But when I started taking the product more regularly, they were young at the time. They're 15 now, but they were young at the time. We would get into the same position. I'm going to take my nap. And I just wouldn't. I just wasn't tired. And that's the kind of thing that would drive you to go clean your garage.
That is such a great testimonial, an example of like, you might not necessarily notice you feel better, but then you start doing stuff. I've had a few clients come back to me and be like, I'm in more pain, I'm worse off. And I'm like, okay, this is usually early on. I'm like, okay, before we started working together, before these changes, what does your life look like? I sat on the couch all day or whatever, right? And they weren't really active. I'm like, okay, and what did you do this weekend? I went for a hike, I gardened, I ran around with my grandkids. And I'm like, so you mean to tell me that, you've made these health changes the last 2 weeks that we've been working together, and you went from completely sedentary to doing a 5-mile hike with your family, and now you're coming back to me complaining you're in pain and you're, more exhausted. I'm like, well, you just were motivated to accomplish more than you have in a very long time. And so a lot of times people don't do that little check-in and go, oh, the health changes are actually making me feel so good. I am now, I'm able to do so much more, because we don't necessarily feel more energy. We just are more alert, and then we have endurance, so that we just don't get exhausted easily.
Yeah.
Right. And that is a true sign of health trending in the right direction.
Yeah.
I love it.
And I think what you described again points to the importance of tracking, or it's very easy to go like I would love to believe again that I'm very mindful and in tune, but the data says that I am not. So I actually need to write things down.
It's been really cool having you on the show, and I want to keep having you here. I know it's been like 2 hours, and I want to just keep geeking out. I'd love to have you back on the show, especially after these studies have been published. And I want to make sure listeners know they can go to myvitalc, as in the letter C, myvitalc.com/LTH, as in Learn True Health. And of course, the link is going to be in the show notes of today's podcast. And you're giving a discount to my listeners for trying their first bottle. Thank you so much for giving a discount. And then you also have your book, and we'll make sure that the link to your book is available. And there's you do a donation to charity. So do you want to let us know about that as well?
Well, yeah, let me provide a little bit of guidance. When you go to myvitalc.com/LTH, We do actually sell an olive oil, avocado oil, and MCT oil. And before I kind of jump into this, my routine daily now, and by the way, because I've already admitted I'm not good at this, when I finally got it as part of my coffee routine, that's when I started taking it on a daily basis. Prior to that, actually, I could get to like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and if I thought that I needed a cup of coffee or a nap, I could always look back and I hadn't taken the product that day. And what I do now is I do kind of a bulletproof coffee thing, right? So that's supposed to be high quality coffee, some ghee, and then some MCT. I actually remove the ghee. It's purified butter. I don't like the flavor that much, and I also don't want those calories, but I do our MCT, about 1.5 teaspoons in our coffee. While that's blending, I'll take about 1.5 teaspoons of our olive oil. I don't think we covered this.
So you've got habit stacking there.
Exactly.
While you're making your coffee, you know to take your supplement. That's great. My husband used to, while he was making coffee, he would do floor exercises until the coffee was finished brewing. This is back when we had like a coffee pot. But habit stacking is great to take something you normally do. Like if you brush your teeth, you could put your bottle, let's say beside your toothbrush. Mm-hmm. And you always remember to brush your teeth, at least you should twice a day, and scrape your tongue. And then you could even like maybe do some oil pulling and then swallow it when you're done if you wanted to. But just have whatever you want to remember to do attached to either before, during, or after an activity you always do. That's called habit stacking. So I do like that. I have to say a caveat. Some people cannot do bulletproof coffee. We see elevated liver markers in some of my clients when they increase their fats that much. And so we want to just like keep it in check, because sometimes people go like really nuts with the bulletproof coffee and kind of go excessive amounts, and then they don't feel like it's excessive, but then we see their liver gets really stressed out from it, and we don't want to do that. So if you're doing bulletproof coffee, less is more, and watch your liver markers would be my biggest advice.
So because you brought up liver, I do have to throw in in that original study, they had one extra piece where a separate set of rats, water, olive oil, and olive oil with C60, they injected with carbon tetrachloride. Now, this is an oxidative agent that attacks the liver. They were trying to look at this antioxidant capability of the molecule. They allowed some certain time, I think it was about 24 hours to pass after the injection. They, humanely euthanized the rats and dissected them and looked at the livers. The water rats did not recover. The olive oil rats recovered some, again, like consume more olive oil. The ESS60 rats, their livers almost completely recovered. So again, managing that oxidative stress in the liver is pretty amazing, in at least
so cool.
in that particular study. And yeah, so I did pull out the ghee. I think it's too much, certainly too much for me. And so 1.5 teaspoons of MCT and 1.5 teaspoons of olive oil. But if you're looking for like, hey, what should I take? And again, our dosing is 1 teaspoon of olive oil. This will taste like a high quality extra virgin olive oil, because that's exactly what it is. And it's got as much of the ESS60 molecule in it. If you're thinking about olive oil, avocado oil, or MCT oil and wondering which one should you start with, we always recommend the olive oil for 2 reasons. The first is we're a science-based organization, and almost all of the research is in olive oil. And then second, there's a higher concentration of the ESS60 molecule in the olive oil. You get about 0.8 milligrams per milliliter in the olive oil, 0.6 in avocado oil, and then 0.3 in MCT oil. So we do recommend the olive oil. We also do offer, in addition to the coupon code for your audience that'll get them $15 off, we offer a 25% discount on subscription. So even if you just like, hey, I want to try 1 bottle, go ahead and go on subscription. As I mentioned earlier, our customer service department has 1,000 5-star reviews on Google. They're not trained to talk you out of canceling your subscription. You can send an email, you can call, whatever, and cancel it. But take advantage of that discount. And honestly, most people just stay on subscription. And then the book piece. So I do have my book. It's called Live Longer and Better. It's available on Amazon for $20, and you can buy it on our website for $20. It's not on that landing page. So again, go to myvitalc.com/LTH, pick up that coupon code, you can go to the menu structure, find the book. The book is also $20 on our website, but for an extra $10, I will autograph that book for you, and 100% of that $10 goes to Operation Underground Railroad. You may remember the movie The Sound of Freedom, which was a great movie about a horrible topic, and that's child sex trafficking, which obviously should be off of our planet yesterday. Operation Underground Railroad is doing a fantastic job. In my opinion, I actually got a chance to see him speak at an event the week before the movie came out, and so
Cool.
it just kind of moved me to do that. And I'll add one other thing. On the landing page, we do have a free, I've done lots of interviews, not nearly as many as you, Ashley. I did a longevity summit where I interviewed 55 experts in longevity, including like Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield, Stephen Gundry, and I compiled like 15 top biohacks. That is a freebie that you can get at that landing page. Just need your email address.
Awesome. So the first thing is go to myvitalc.com/LTH and try the subscription so you get the discount that you're giving. And then go grab your book and then sign up for your email list so you can get those. So there's lots of cool stuff, basically. And I'm going to make sure the links are there in the show notes of today's interview at learnsurehealth.com. Chris, it's been really cool having you on the show. This bottle, and you're offering it in different forms, like you said. I'm definitely going to try your olive oil for sure. I'm very excited. And medicinal olive oil should make you, after you take it, it should like make you your throat tickle.
Yeah.
It should like you kind of get like you start trying to clear your throat. Like it should have this tickly sensation, like this almost like numbing tickly sensation. That's when you know you've got that medicinal compound. So it's that's when you know you got a good one.
I call it like a peppery flavor. And you may have been to an Italian restaurant where they'll put the olive oil and then they'll crack pepper in it. They're actually trying to make that olive oil taste more expensive.
No, give me the good stuff. Bring out the good stuff. Don't give me the.
I don't need cracked pepper.
Don't give me that cheap stuff.
I'll share this. You do not need cracked pepper in our olive oil.
It'll taste peppery to begin with. That's cool. So, if I took a dose that you recommend as an adult, how long does that bottle last?
So the bottle's 120 mils. It's right at 24 days if you're taking the full teaspoon or full 5 mils. You can back off just a little and that'll be fine and stretch it to a full 30 days. I'll tell you, I've been going through our orders. We just switched to Shopify, so it's been a little bit of work lately, a little bit more work lately. It's always a little bit of work. And just noticing how many people are ordering the 240 mil bottle, so the kind of double bottle, and even 2 at a time. It's just amazing. We have customers who have ordered 151 times. We've been in business since 2019, like selling this product through this website. So they're ordering multiple products per month for the entire time we've been in business.
It'd be neat to interview them.
Yes, like it's as I'm seeing them, I'm like, one, I'm flagging them because I want to do a social media post about it, and then 2, have conversations with them.
No, you should totally do a series. Maybe offer them like a case of product or something. Offer them something, but you should totally interview them because I'd love to hear their stories, right? Because these people have been ordering for years. Like, what's going on? Are they like they're probably giving it to all their animals, their friends, their family? I know people will invest in their animals, like their dogs and cats, that they'll invest in their animals before they'll invest in themselves. And say with children, we'll invest in our children before we'll invest in ourselves. And so even just to extend the life of your pet, which would in turn, save you in vet bills, but just to extend the life of your pet and your, and also I'm thinking of like our elderly people we're taking care of, our grandmas and grandpas and our mother-in-laws and father-in-laws and moms and dads. I'm thinking about the older people in my life that I want to give a bottle to and see if it could help, or not if, but how it will in turn help them. And
we actually
it gets me excited.
Pet versions too. We have a dog version and a cat version. It's really just our olive oil, our high quality olive oil product with a little bit of bacon essence for the dogs and a little bit of salmon essence for the dogs. But I already mentioned one pet testimonial. It's again, there's no placebo with pets, so it's fascinating, and it actually reminded me. There's a guy, Kyle Zagradowski. He's the CEO and founder and one of the founders of OsteoStrong. That's an organization helping people build bone density. It's at least across the U.S. and into probably global, so certainly into some other nations. His son brought home the rut of a litter, and the dog had water on its brain, so it was shaking all the time, could barely eat. Took it to the vet. They were like, "This is not going to make it." My product showed up like 3 days after the dog showed up. He was triple serving the dog. The dog at the time he wrote, and this is a review that's on Google. He wrote, "Yeah, the dog's 80% better." And when I took it back to the vet was like, "This is kind of miraculous." And what Kyle, who's in the health and wellness industry, said, "Chris, I will never not take your product."
It's so cool.
It's amazing.
That's so cool. Chris, I'm very excited to publish this and get this information out there, especially because I do know some of my listeners who have come to me and we've chatted about C60. And they were like me, buying it like from shady places in the internet, going like, "Well, I've seen the studies, I've heard the stories, but we didn't have a place to buy it that was trustworthy, and now we do." So thank you. I'm excited to get my bottle, and I'll let the listeners know how it's going for me, especially in our Facebook group, the Learn to Health Facebook group, where we all jam and share. We've got thousands of listeners there in the group, and we all ask questions and answer questions and share with each other. So I'll be sure to definitely share my journey there as well. myvitalc.com/LTH gets you that discount. And I am going to also sign up. I'm going to do what you said, because I looked at it and I was like, oh, bigger discount with the auto ship, and don't mind if I do. So
Please do.
I'll be doing that, because like you said, please cancel if you don't like it, and you guarantee, you're standing behind your product, and I think that's great, and you've got great customer service, so I appreciate you and all you do. Please come back on the show, especially after you publish those studies, because I can't wait to jam with you again and learn more.
Ashley, thank you so much for having me. You asked some great questions. This was a great journey. I enjoyed spending this. It went so fast. 2 hours and 15 minutes with you. It was amazing.
I know, right? And I mean, I'm like, man, can I do a 3 hour? I don't know.
I think we could have.
So we'll just have to have you back. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ashley.
I hope you enjoyed today's interview with Chris. This is certainly an interesting topic, and anything we can do to support the optimal function of our mitochondria, of our cells, to extend not only the length of our life, but the quality of our life, the quality of each and every day. And I love that just something simple like adding this natural supplement can drastically improve our health in the now, the quality of our life in the now, and for years to come, especially with also our pets and elderly family members. Like, just think of all the people and our furry children, our furry animal children, and our regular children, and just everyone that we love in our life could be supported by this pure C60. You can go to myvitalc.com/LTH for the special coupon code that he is giving listeners. I'm just so happy that we can provide a discount that allows you to enjoy a bottle and see how it works for you. I want you to come to our Facebook group and share your experience with it, or you can email me, support@learntoyourhealth.com, but go to myvitalc.com/LTH, grab yourself a bottle, and like he said, even if you don't intend to be on subscription, scroll halfway down the page where the area where it says different, subscribe and saves, and you save something between $40 and $60 additional dollars in addition to the coupon if you go on subscribe and save, and then you can cancel. You can call them up. They have a 5-star rating, and you can call them up and you can cancel the subscription. So he wants you to get that biggest discount. In looking at his sales, he says most people actually stay on subscription because they notice a difference and because it makes such a big difference, which is exciting, right? We only want to do these things if they work. And he stands behind his product. That's another thing. I only align myself with companies that make a difference, that are backed by science, that really will help you, and that, hopefully give us a discount too. And then also they have some kind of money back guarantee or some kind of guarantee, because if a company doesn't stand behind their product, that's a red flag for me. So I love that he does. And if you want, you can go to the description in wherever you're listening from. Just go to the show notes, and the link is right there. myvitalc.com/LTH gets you right there to the coupon code. You're going to have to, it tells you the coupon code because it's a picture. I think it's just so that it can hide from the bots. But you just go and look at the coupon code, and then from there, you can use that coupon code when you're purchasing. And right now, the coupon code is True Health, all one word. So go to myvitalc.com/LTH and use that coupon code and give it a shot. Let me know how it goes. I want to hear from you. I want to hear your results. I'm going to have Chris on the show again in about 2 months. That'll give my family and I some time to be on this version of C60. I've never been on his version before, which is the purest in the world, and to experience it for ourselves. And then we're going to dive deeper into the science and into the studies and into everything, kind of just take this episode to the next level. So that's going to happen in 2 months. So you could be on this journey with us. Grab yourself a bottle or two and let me know how it goes for you. And then you can also send in your questions to me, because I'm going to have him back on the show. So if you have any questions for Chris, please feel free to email them to me, support@learntruehealth.com, or you can come in the Facebook group, the Learn True Health Facebook group, and shoot me a question right there. Just say, hey, these are my questions for Chris. It's a great community. We have thousands of listeners in there, and we're asking questions and answering questions and helping each other. Just today, there's a woman asking about water filters. We often talk about things like that, just those real life things, like what kind of water filter do you use, and what do you recommend for this kind of supplement or this kind of problem? And just people are sharing all the time, and it's great because it's a wonderful holistic community. A lot of my guests are in the Facebook group too and answer questions too. So come join that sense of community where we can all focus on our holistic health together by going to the Learn True Health Facebook group. You go to learntruehealth.com/group forwards you there, learntruehealth.com/group. And then, of course, join my newsletter. I have a brand new newsletter. I've spent months working on it, creating articles that help build your health up. No matter where you are in your health journey, it's designed to take your health to the next level. And I also give you a part of my book for free when you do that. So you can go to learntruehealth.com/free. That's learntruehealth.com/free to get on my newsletter, my brand new newsletter. I'd love to see you there and share everything that can support your body's ability to heal itself so you can achieve and learn true health. Thank you so much for sharing this episode with those you care about. And thank you so much for listening. In this day and age, to have optimal health, we can't just go to the doctor, wait to get sick and go to the doctor. We have to educate ourselves. And so this podcast is designed to support us in this way. And by sharing these episodes with those you care about, we are helping to end needless suffering. So the more you share, the more we are helping others. And you don't even know what kind of ripple effect it'll have, like that domino effect. You share with this one person, that one person shares it with this other person, then all of a sudden it's like been an answer to a prayer. So please continue to share my episodes with those you care about, because we are making such a significant difference in people's lives by bringing them the health answers that they've been looking for. Look forward to more amazing episodes to come. Have yourself a fantastic rest of your day.